Hey guys, Jay here. Exciting chapter here. So we're gonna work on the animations for the player. We're gonna add a jogging, movement animation for the player when they're trying to move somewhere, and then we're also gonna have an idle animation in this video. So moving forward, also gonna add a rolling mechanic where you can roll forward or wherever it is. So we're gonna tackle that in a different video. But in this video, we're gonna learn the basics of animators, animations, having a blend tree, and then sort of using those controls, and when you're actually moving, trigger those animations to take place, so you easily go back and forth and transition between those animations. It's going to be an exciting chapter. Let's get started. So where do I get my animations? There's this amazing site called Mixamo. Mixamo was acquired by Adobe, I think. Mixamo is basically a library that's free of charge, believe it or not, and commercially viable as well, commercially available as well. It has a lot of motion captured animations that are free of charge that you can use. It even has a bunch of characters that you can download. So the good thing is most of those characters, most of those animations are compatible with most of the 3D character models that are available on the Asset Store. So Mixamo is very closely aligned with Unity's system, so it's very easy to use any of those characters with the animation. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to grab two animations for the character, a moving animation, and then an idle animation. We're going to start building that setup. So let's have a look at Mixamo. So it is mixamo.com, or the link is down there as well. You can click on that. But basically, you just got to create a free account. And once you're in, you should have an interface that's similar to this. So what we're going to do, though, is we're not going to obviously use any of these characters. We already have a character. We are going to upload our character. What this does is it allows Mixamo to rig our character to match Mixamo animations. What does rigging mean? In animation, rigging means creating a skeleton, a fake skeleton with joints for these animations to actually move, just like a real human being, right? So that's the process of rigging. That process is called rigging, and Mixamo does that for you, given that you upload a humanoid character. Now, if you upload like a animal or something and then expect Mixamo to rig humanoid skeletons, that's not going to work, right? Obviously, two different skeletons, guys. So use a humanoid character, upload it, Mixamo will do the rest. Now, I'm going to upload my character by clicking this, right? I just want to get reference to where I have saved my character. So it's in models, adventure character, and then make sure you don't upload the prefab. Instead, you upload the mesh, right? So here's the man mesh. So I'm just going to get showing Explorer. Let's just open in another folder. Okay, I just wanted to see where exactly I saved my project. Now let's get over here, click on upload character. I can actually now drag and drop my mesh here, or I can select it. So I have actually saved my character in mesh man_mesh.fbx. Just simply upload that mesh file. Give it a couple of seconds for it to upload the 3D model, and then Mixamo will do the auto rigging for us, and then be good to go. We can download some animations, and yeah, that's about it. We can start using it in Unity. So give it a couple of seconds, guys. I'm just gonna wait for that. All right, guys, Mixamo is ready. As you can see, our character has come to life now. So the mesh is now live, and it has a sample animation for us to review that we can look around with. It's pretty cool. So I'll hit next. We don't have to do anything. Now it's loaded up as a T-pose in Mixamo. Awesome. What do we do next? We simply go to the animations tab over here. So if you click on that, it has a bunch of animations, like hundreds, I believe, hundreds of animations that we can download. Any of these animations are compatible. Guys, so when you're building a game, come over to Mixamo, get whatever the kind of animation that you want. There's like 52 pages full of animations. It's a lot. So all I need is an idle animation first. Download that. So I'm looking for an idle animation like this, like an action pose, right? It's not like just standing, but like an action pose, but breathing at the same time. This looks cool enough for me. So I'm going to download this. Now it's going to ask you if you want to download with some of these properties here. I always go with the format FBX for Unity. So the good thing about Mixamo is that Mixamo knows that a lot of Unity developers use Mixamo. So they have a specific format that's more optimized for Unity. Go with that. FBX for Unity. The rest, I'm just going to leave the same, and then hit download. Wait a couple of seconds to download, and then you're good to go. The next animation that I want to get is a movement animation. So I want to have, say, like a jog of sorts, right? Like I said, my character is going to have like a tiny jog similar to this, right? So the character is going to move like that. That's pretty good. Okay. And see, one thing that we got to keep in mind, guys, is that the animation can have root motion. Now, what's root motion in animation? Root motion in animation is basically the animation itself has a movement. As you can see, it's moving from this coordinate to that coordinate. We don't want that. Why? Because we control that in Unity. We want to have control over the movement, which we have already done in the previous videos, right? So we don't want the animation sort of overriding it or getting in the way of that. So what do? We check this setting called in place in Mixamo. What that means is that, as you may have guessed, it's moving in place, right? Perfect. This is great because we are anyway moving the character, so we just got to make it look like it's actually moving. That's what we're doing. Click download, same settings, done. Awesome. What we're going to do next is we're going to create a new folder, guys. Remember, we are trying to keep this as organized as possible, so we're going to right click our assets, folder, create a new folder called animations, right? Inside of that, I'm going to create a folder called player, because we're going to have an enemy animation folder as well in the future sessions, right? So go over to the play animations. I'm simply going to drag and drop what I just downloaded, the two animations. So just simply drag the idle, drop it here, and drag the movement and drop it here as well. I'm going to rename this just to make things easier. So this is my jog. This is my idle. Right. So we got that sorted. So click on the idle. You have a tiny little preview here as well. And let's go to animation here. And then make sure that you check on loop time here. So how did I do this again? I'll do it again. So click on the animation that you just brought into your project, the idle one for starters. On the inspect on the right-hand side, click on animation tab. Scroll over here and check loop time. Why? We want to loop it, right? We don't want the animation to just go for one cycle and finish. It's an idle, which means that the player could just be chilling for like 30 minutes and the animation should loop, right? So loop it. Awesome. Other than that, we also want to change this. So Mixamo has this bad habit of putting Mixamo.com as the animation's name, which I don't like. So rename it to idle as well. You can name it anything you like, but let's keep it consistent, idle. Done, and then hit apply over here at the bottom right. Do the same thing for jog. Click jog, go to animation tab, rename this to jog, and loop time as well, because play could be running for a while. We want the animation to loop. Done. That's done, guys. Now what we're going to do is, in the same folder, you can right click, go to create, and then click on animator. There you go. Animator controller. Right. So we're going to call that player animator. Now, what's an animator? So you can already see that we have multiple animations, right? We want to combine all of them in some sort of board where we can sort of map how each of these animations are triggered. We only want to jog if the player is moving. We want to stop jogging and idle when the player is not moving, right? So where do we map that rule set? That's inside of an animator. Now, where is this animator, you ask? So you click on the animator over here, the animator file, go to window, animation, animator, not animation, animator. And you should have this sort of, I don't know what this is called. It's sort of like a board of sorts. Like basically you can move around and create sort of a timeline here, right? So we got this thing going on over here, which is great, but head over to parameters, right? So this is where we're going to say, this is the player's current velocity, right? That's how we're going to calculate if the player is moving or player is standing still, the velocity, right? So we can already get the velocity using our rigid body, which we have set up already. Rigid body is going to calculate all the physics and things like that, guys. So rigid body already knows the velocity of the character when the player is moving, right? So we're going to get a reference to that over here in the timeline, in the animator. And then based on that value, we're going to decide if you want to move forward or stay still. All right, this is what we're going to do now. So click this plus button over here in the parameters, right? And then set float as the parameter type. And we're going to say velocity. Oops, velocity. Right, so set it as 0 by default. It's very much like a variable here, but sort of a visual way of doing it. Awesome. So in the animator, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to right click over here in any of these gray space. We're going to go to create state from blend tree. Okay, I'm going to explain what that is in just a bit. So blend tree. What is a blend tree? A blend tree is a way where we can have certain set of rules and then have a specific set of animations and decide how you're going to blend between these, right? What does that mean? You're gonna stay idle, and then suddenly the player wants to move. Instead of immediately snapping into a jogging animation, we blend into it. It's a transition, which means you're gonna have a really nice, smooth, really cool looking animation at the end when the player is just moving around, stopping, moving, stopping, moving. It's gonna come to a nice stop when it's going idle from running to jogging. To running to idle, and then idle to jogging as well. So you'll see it in a bit instead of me explaining it. Now that you have a blend tree, all you have to do is double click it. Now you're in blend tree editor, okay? And you can always go back by clicking on base layer. That's the base layer, double click blend tree. All right, so blend tree already detected that what we want to do is velocity, which is the parameter that we added. It detected that. So on the right-hand side, we can add as many animations as you like. Now, in certain games, you can have a strafe that's left and right strafe where it just goes side by side. You can even do that with the blend tree. But for this, we're only going to have one movement and then one idle. Very simple. But then obviously it's up to you to explore this even further and try different animations. Feel free to do that. But in this video, we can do two. Click the plus button here, click on add motion field. And this motion is going to be our idle, right? We're going to add another one, add motion field for our movement. Now we have two animations that it's going to blend. So this right here is a visual representation of how it blends and transitions. We don't have to change anything. It's just a visual representation. Now, it says none for both, which means we haven't dragged these animations yet. That's what we're going to do. So while you have this open, in the project window in the top bottom left, we have the idle. We're going to click on this little arrow, which is going to show all the different parts of that man's body here. But then at the bottom, you should see a triangle shape like this, which is the animation. That's the actual animation, right? Simply drag that triangle over here, right? We can do the same thing for the jogging. Click that little triangle right next to the jog model. Scroll down there until you see the triangle jog. That makes sense, right? Click and drag to this slot. Awesome. So make sure that you have automate thresholds turned on, which means Unity is going to calculate whether to stay idle or to go jogging based on the velocity, right? So if the velocity is 0, as you can see over here, which Unity intelligently calculated for us, if you're using 2020 and more and all the versions, it's going to have this. Threshold is going to be 0, idle will be triggered. If threshold is going to be 1, it's going to start jogging, right? Which is a pretty cool effect that we're going to see. That's it, guys. That's all we have to do here. Control S to save this, and then go back to the scene, right? Now all we've got to do is, that velocity value that we added, we just got to set that from the code, and then we get to go. That's all we had to do. So let's do that. Where do we do that? We got to go back to our scripts folder, and then open up our third-person controller, right? So here's how we're going to do that. First, we need reference to the animator, right? We always need reference to something in Unity if you want to change something about it in the script, right? Just like how we did it with Rigidbody, if that makes sense. So we're going to create another public variable over here. We're going to call it animator, right? Control S, we're going to drag and drop it later. What we're going to do now is calculate the velocity based on the Rigidbody's movement. Now, I'm going to pull up the script for it just to save time, and then I'm going to paste it here, and then we should be good to go. All right, just to save time, guys, I'm just going to paste the code here and explain, and then you guys can also find the script down below. Awesome. So here's what we're doing here in the animation side, just after the movement stuff that we did earlier. The first thing we're going to do is calculate the velocity of our character. The first thing is we got to store this velocity, the flat velocity, which is basically the uncalculated, sort of like the raw velocity that's coming out of the rigid body. That's why it's called flat velocity. we're going to store it in a new vector3 to store, what is vector3 again? XYZ. We're going to store it in a new vector3, and the X variable is going to be rigid body.velocity.x. Y is 0 because we're not flying up, right? So Y has to be 0. But there's Z value, so rigid body.velocity.z. Now remember, RB is declared up there, okay? Awesome. Right after that, then we have a condition saying if flat velocity to magnitude is greater than movement. So magnitude is the length of this vector. Is that's a weird way of explaining that, Unity. So I'm sure there are better ways of explaining that. What that means is if the velocity is greater than our movement speed, we actually now moving, right? We're moving right now. So that's a way of doing that. So inside of that if condition, right? If this condition is met, what we're going to do is vector3 limited velocity. We're basically going to limit the velocity quite a bit because we don't want the massive raw velocity that's coming out of rigid body to kind of, mess things up. We want to normalize it. Remember, normalize. We kind of remove those decimals and things like that, and then kind of bring down the value, and then multiply that by movement speed, which is up there anyways. Next thing is, guys, we set the new velocity, RB.velocity equals limit of x, limit of y, and limit of z. So basically get the x, y, z values from this and then set it, right? Again, don't stress too much on this. You're going to get this eventually, but follow along right now. And then the more you do it, the more it'll start making sense, right? So the next thing is we're going to have to store this velocity up there. So what we can easily do is we can just put a float here. We're not going to use it anywhere else. So might as well declare it right here. So float velocity equals the new velocity that we have calculated, and we're going to pass that on to the animator. So this is how we pass a value to the animator. We already have an animator instance up there, and that's declared over here. And then we're going to say animator.setFloat, because it's a float value in the animator that we declared. Velocity is the name of that. Make sure that you guys match this with exactly what you added in the animator timeline, the name, and then you pass in this value. And now the velocity that's coming out of the player's movement will be updated in the animator, right? Now, what does that mean? The animator has a blend tree, which is going to transition between these two animations, and then easily the player starts moving, right? Now, the first thing we got to do, though, is I just want to double check. If you go to the player, do we have to drag and drop anything? Yep, we do. So always remember, if you run this without actually dragging and dropping these important components here, it's going to give you an error in the console, and it's not going to work. It's going to crash your game, right? So go to your third-person controller in the player, the animator slot, drag in the player's animator, which is up here, right? So just drag this component, put it there. All right, next up, we're still not done. If you scroll up to the animator, you'll notice that the controller is none. Make sure to drag in the controller that we created. Where did we create that? Remember, it was in the animations folder, player. If you actually collapse all these, player animator, that's the file that we created earlier. Drag and drop that to the animator component, which should be already there in your character. All right. The next thing is you'll also notice a little property here called apply root motion. Remember what I said about root motion earlier? We don't want that. Root motion is baked in movement for your character when it's actually moving. We don't want that. We control the movements, right? So uncheck this, right? That being said, there's one last step left. and trust me, that's the last step here, guys. All we have to do now is click on the animation that you downloaded from Mixamo, which is in your animations folder, play folder, right? I was supposed to do this in the beginning, but I realized I didn't do it, so I'm going to do it now. So if you click on any of those animations and go to the inspector's rig tab, not animations, that's what we visited earlier, rig. In the rig, there's something known as avatar. So it says no avatar right now, which is not good. Click on that, click on create from this model, and click apply, right? What is an avatar? Avatar is basically the entire, it's really important for the skeleton. Basically, the avatar stores the information about your skeleton that Mixamo conveniently rigged for us. So that's what we just did there. We said, create the avatar, which basically has the definition of the skeleton from this model. And we're going to do the same thing for jog. Click that, go to rig, create from model, apply. All right, now that we did that, we just got to make sure that we use the same avatar for the animator controller. All right, so go to your player, And in the animated controller, you got this warning here. How do we get rid of this? That's because blending some generic clips animate transforms that are already bound by a humanoid avatar. That's because this avatar that's defined here came from the Unity Asset Store. That's a different avatar. Instead, we got to use the new avatar that we generated in these two animations, right? So what we have to do is just go to any of these two. Like, it doesn't matter. I'll just go with the idle one, expand it, scroll down. There should be a new avatar, like a little skeleton icon created here, right? Just click that and drag it to the player's animator avatar slot. Drop it, and then it'll start working. Control S, done. We're done, guys. Let's test this out. I'll maximize this to go full screen, and let's try it out. As soon as you start, immediately the player goes into idle state, which is awesome. So I can look around like this. Awesome. All right. And then we're going to start moving. Oh, yeah, look at that. The player is now going into movement. And as you can see, when I stop pressing the W key, it doesn't just snap into idle, it transitions. That's the advantage of using blend tree, guys. So look at this. It just slowly stops, right? You can even smooth it out even more than that, but I'm happy with this. This looks great. Now I can explore this entire area and then, yeah, basically get started with the rest of the stuff. This is already looking like a game. Perfect. Amazing. All right, this looks good. So the jittery motions like this, we can easily fix them in the upcoming lessons, but this already looks really good. And yeah, I'm happy with this for this video. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to do a roll animation so you can roll around. And that's a cool animation, especially when you're dodging attacks from the enemies and things like that. So you've seen that in most games nowadays. That being said, guys, thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video.